24th of May 1941. Shortly before 6 a.m, a Royal Navy squadron comprised of the battlecruiser HMS Hood and the battleship Prince of Wales engaged the German battleship Bismarck and the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen in the Denmark Strait between Greenland and Iceland. Within 20 minutes, the Hood had been sunk with the loss of almost all hands, while the Prince of Wales was significantly damaged and outfought. Bismarck, meanwhile, was sufficiently damaged to end her Atlantic raiding sortie. Despite the wealth of information that exists on the Battle of the Denmark Strait, the engagement has been a source of great debate owing to the confusion that stems from the official documentation and the various accounts of the battle. Some of the confusion that exists stems from a series of photographs taken from on board the Prinz Eugen. The photographs taken from the Prinz Eugen show the Bismarck on both sides of the heavy cruiser, apparently engaging ships on both her port and starboard sides, without any supporting evidence demonstrating how this apparent crossover took place. One of the theories that has been advanced to explain this crossover is the so-called reverse photo theory, which argues that there was no crossover between the two German vessels and that the photographs have simply been printed in reverse. The reverse photo theory has never been universally accepted in the naval community, with the idea being accepted by and large as implausible. In his work Pursuit, Ludwig Kennedy has concluded that a number of photographs illustrating the Battle of the Denmark Strait have been printed in reverse. Similarly, the German naval historian Professor Jürgen Rohr has also accepted this theory as being correct. The debate that has existed over the photographs of the Battle of the Denmark Strait is something which I have previously looked at in my third book entitled The Battle of the Denmark Strait, an analysis of the battle and the loss of HMS Hood. Questions therefore arise as for the reasons behind the disparity between the theories and the photographs showing the engagement. Have the photographs simply been printed in reverse? If so, why has this theory never been universally accepted? During Operation Rheinübung, the codename given to the raiding operation to be undertaken by the Bismarck and Prinz Eugen, of which the Battle of the Denmark Strait was a part, the Prinz Eugen carried a staff photographer called Legemann, who took still photographs of the Bismarck with a 35mm camera. Legemann was accompanied on the voyage by another cameraman who took motion picture footage of the operation with a 16mm camera. Both of these two photographers covered the Battle of the Denmark Strait, and what they captured provides vital clues as to how the overall battle was ultimately fought. In this, the motion picture footage is useful for recording events on a second-by-second basis and helps to establish the exact sequence in which all of Legemann's still photographs were taken. The photographs have been the source of debate among historians and enthusiasts, as they appear to show the Bismarck on both the port and starboard sides of the Prinz Eugen during the engagement. This has sparked debate as to in which direction the German vessels were in fact sailing, what ships the Bismarck was apparently engaging, and when and how this apparent switching of sides occurred. Compounding matters, none of the photographs show the Bismarck making any turns. Many of the photographs in question are held by the US Naval History and Heritage Command, with others being held by the German Bundesarchiv. The first photograph in the sequence taken during the Battle of the Denmark Strait by Legemann is NH 69722. In this photograph, the Bismarck is clearly seen astern of the Prinz Eugen, firing to port at HMS Hood. The approximate time that this image was taken is 05:55 am. From this photograph, it can be clearly seen that Legemann snapped this image while looking aft on the starboard side of the Prinz Eugen. Having taken this photograph, Legemann walked over to the port side of the ship and took up a position beside the aft 105mm anti-aircraft guns. It is from this position that he took the vast majority, indeed if not all, of the other photographs during the course of the battle. NH 69729 is the next photograph in the sequence and shows the Bismarck coming up the port side of the Prinz Eugen during the period that she was still firing at the Hood. The image captures the huge cloud of smoke created by the Bismarck as she fires a broadside. NH 69730 is the next photograph in the sequence and was taken at approximately 06:01 am. Taken moments after the Hood had blown up, the Bismarck is shown firing at the Prince of Wales. This photograph is quite possibly one of the most famous photographs taken of the Bismarck, and is certainly one of the most famous photographs illustrating the Battle of the Denmark Strait. In the image, the Bismarck is silhouetted by the flash resulting from turrets Caesar and Dora firing. In the top right-hand corner of the photograph, the muzzle ends of one of the Prinz Eugen's twin SKC-33 anti-aircraft guns can be seen. The darkness of the image, compared to other images in the sequence, owes something to overexposure, and does not, in fact, show the engagement occurring at night, as some have sought to argue. The final photograph in this series is held by the German Bundesarchiv, and is designated BA 146 1984 05513. This photograph shows the Bismarck coming up the port side of the Prinz Eugen. Taken at approximately 06:03 am, the Bismarck had, moments earlier, fired a full broadside against the Prince of Wales. This helps to place the photograph in sequence with regards to its timing, as it was taken near the beginning of the Bismarck's action against the Prince of Wales, when she was still firing full salvos at the British battleship. These photographs are consistent with the other factual evidence of the battle that showed that the Bismarck moved from a position astern of Prinz Eugen and travelled up the port side of the cruiser until 06:02 am. The salvo plot of HMS Prince of Wales shows that the Bismarck covered a greater distance than the Prinz Eugen, and therefore suggests that the Bismarck increased speed to her top speed of 30 knots, while Prinz Eugen continued sailing at 27 knots. According to the speed chart of the Prinz Eugen, the ship remained at 27 knots throughout the battle. Faced with this and the fact that the Bismarck was likely travelling at 30 knots, the battleship would have been able to gain approximately 100 yards per minute at a speed difference of 3 knots. This is consistent with how far the Bismarck is seen to have advanced in the photographs. Beginning at 06:03 am, Prinz Eugen made a series of 3 hard turns to starboard, before straightening out on a course parallel to that of the Bismarck. These turns were ordered by Captain Jose Helmut Brinkmann, commanding officer of the Prinz Eugen, so as to open the distance between his ship and the flagship, and to make his cruiser less vulnerable to fire from the Prince of Wales, which landed over the intended target. These turns prohibited the taking of any photographs for the next 4 minutes, as not only were the turns executed rapidly, but the slope on the deck during them made it virtually impossible to take clear photographs or steady images in general until the ship had stabilised. It was now that the second set of photographs were taken by Legemann, which show the Bismarck on the starboard side of the Prinz Eugen firing to starboard. The images were likely taken between 06:08 am and 06:10 am, shortly, if not immediately after, the Prinz Eugen had executed the last of her sharp turns to starboard. NH69728 is the first photograph in the second series of images, and would appear to be the first image on a new roll of film. The left-hand edge of the photograph is slightly clouded, which indicates that the image may be the first on a new roll of film, and that the new roll of film that was installed in the camera was not turned sufficiently to take up the film leader. Given that it would have been impossible for any meaningful photographs to be taken between 06:03 am and 06:08 am, when the Prinz Eugen was making her sharp turns, it is perhaps the case that Legemann took the opportunity to reload his camera. NH69728 shows the Bismarck silhouetted against the light horizon, further ahead of the Prinz Eugen than she appeared in BA 146-1984-05513. If Bismarck had maintained her course while the Prinz Eugen was executing her turns, the Bismarck would have ended up somewhat ahead of the Prinz Eugen and some distance further away laterally than she had been at 06:03 am. This is indicated in the photograph. In the image there are large separate puffs of smoke which can be seen over the stern end of the Bismarck, which indicate the firing of 3 of the ship's main battery turrets a few seconds apart. A large water column indicating the impact of a shell can be seen approximately a ship's length behind the Bismarck. It is likely that this was from a single shell fired by the Prince of Wales as she retreated from the battle. The next images in the sequence are Bundesarchiv photographs BA 146-1968-01525 and BA 146-1968-01526. These images were taken seconds later and are almost identical to NH69728, with the main differentiating feature between the 3 images being the smoke plumes from the 3 turrets, which are further behind the ship and have partially dissipated. BA 146-1968-01512 was taken approximately 18 seconds after BA 146-1968-01526, and shows another solitary shell splash indicating another shell landing in the water from the retreating Prince of Wales. In the photograph, the Bismarck herself appears visibly smaller, indicating that she is pulling further ahead of the Prinz Eugen. NH69726 was taken 29 seconds after BA 146-1968-01512. This image provides evidence that clearly establishes the direction that the Bismarck was sailing and the direction in which she was firing. Like the preceding photographs, NH69726 is a silhouette view of the Bismarck. A huge fireball can be seen directly above the stern of the ship, brightly illuminating parts of the battleship's superstructure. In the image, all of what are apparently the portside surfaces, including those near the fireball, are in shadow, indicating that the Bismarck was firing to starboard when the photograph was taken. The lack of a reflection of the fireball on the surface of the water on the port side further indicates that the Bismarck was firing away from the Prinz Eugen when the image was captured. Of note here are the images NH69725 and NH69731. These images both show smoke from the exploding hood and smoke from HMS Prince of Wales. In these photographs, the Prince of Wales is noted as being the smoke column to the left of centre, while the exploding hood is the massive smoke on the right-hand side of the image. The image caption for NH69725 from the US Naval History and Heritage Command reads, "British battleship Prince of Wales, left smoke column, turns to open the range after she was hit by German gunfire. Smoke at right marks the spot where HMS Hood had exploded and sunk a few minutes earlier." Similarly, the caption for NH69731 states, "British battleship Prince of Wales, smoke column in left centre, under fire from the German battleship Bismarck and heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, with smoke from the sunken HMS Hood at right. Splashes from the right are shells from Prince of Wales that fell well short of the German ships." Debate surrounds what is shown in NH69731. According to author and historian Robert J. Winklereth, the photograph was taken 30 seconds after NH69724, which shows the explosion of the hood. Other commentators, such as Paul Cadogan and a number of individuals in online forums, have put forward the claim that in NH69731, the smoke column on the left is in fact smoke from the exploding hood, and that the large patch of smoke on the right is in fact the Prince of Wales. It is claimed that the large smoke plume is a combination of the funnel smoke from the battleship and the smoke screen produced during her retreat, and that the photograph was taken at around 06:03 am. There is also a claim that in this photograph the shell splashes are either from the Bismarck or the Prince of Wales that fell short. In her book Power at Sea, Volume 2, Liesl A. Rose includes a copy of NH69731 and a caption which states, "Battle in the Denmark Strait, May 1941. Shell splashes from the German battleship Bismarck fall near HMS Prince of Wales, where burning oil and the final sinking remains of HMS Hood are to the left. Photographed from Bismarck's escort, the cruiser Prinz Eugen, which separated from the doomed battleship and made port." Winklereth's interpretation of the photograph is based on the official image caption provided by the Naval History and Heritage Command. If Cadogan and others are correct, then the interpretations of NH69725 are incorrect. Winklereth has commented on the photograph. It shows the splashes from the Bismarck's 6th salvo, fired just before the hood exploded, directly in front of the smoke cloud that still hung over the sinking hood. Both photographs, NH69724 and NH69731, show the smoke plumes from the funnel of the Prince of Wales still to the left of the hood after the Prince of Wales turned towards the German squadron before she sailed around the wreckage of the hood. The latter photograph was erroneously captioned in other publications as indicating the splashes came from shells fired by the Prince of Wales that fell well short of the German ships. A caption is of course completely ridiculous for a number of reasons, and yet it is accepted by some as being the truth. The Prince of Wales salvo plot account for every salvo fired by the British battleship, and after the Prince of Wales got the range on the Bismarck, her misses were never more than about 1,000 yards off. The splashes shown in the photograph are near the horizon, were 15,000 yards, 8 nautical miles away from the vantage point of the photographer. Just looking at the photograph should be sufficient to discount those other captions. The timeline of the battle states that the Prince of Wales took evasive action around the sinking hood before beginning her retreat from the battle. It is often written that at the time of the hood's explosion, HMS Prince of Wales was turning, and that as she did so, she found the sinking hood directly in her path. In response to this, Captain Leach ordered evasive action to starboard to avoid the sinking battlecruiser, and that this placed the Prince of Wales directly between the sinking hood and the German ships. It is possible that the interpretation put forward by Winklereth is not correct. In NH69724, the Prince of Wales is just visible to the left of the exploding hood. If NH69731 was taken 30 seconds after NH69724, as Winklereth claims, how can it be that the range between the exploding hood on the right and the Prince of Wales on the left had increased by such a large margin? Supposing Cadogan and those who have discussed the image in online forums are correct, what evidence supports the claim that the Prince of Wales is on the right and that the hood is on the left? In the photograph there is a large area of smoke that Winklerith claims is smoke from the Hood, and that others have sought to claim as being the smoke screen from the Prince of Wales. In the centre is a drifting plume of smoke that is claimed to be from burning oil on the surface of the water, and then there is a mysterious dark shape to the left of centre. In online forums it is claimed that the dark shape to the left of centre is related to the sinking Hood. Winklerith has claimed that the shell splashes near the patch of smoke on the right are from the 6th salvo fired by the Bismarck, which was fired before the Hood exploded. If one analyses NH69731 carefully, between the dark shape to the left of centre and the central drifting smoke, shell splashes can be seen. While it is possible that these could be from Bismarck's 6th salvo, if the photograph was taken at 06:03 am, as is claimed online, then the columns of water thrown up by the impact of the shells would be long gone. In online forums it is alternatively claimed that the shell splashes between the Prinz Eugen from where the photograph has been taken and the smoke on the right are from the Bismarck or the Prince of Wales, which fell short. While it is possible that the shell splashes mark the impact of shells from the Bismarck that fell short of their target, this is unlikely because of the angle of the shell impact in relation to the speculated Prince of Wales and the known position of the Bismarck. The Bismarck was, by this point, ahead of the Prinz Eugen. For the shell to have come down where it did in relation to the smoke plume, the Bismarck would have had to have been behind Prinz Eugen. Furthermore, the shell splash is too close to the Prinz Eugen for it to have come from the Bismarck. On the other side, it is claimed that the shell came from the Prince of Wales and that it was from a salvo that fell short. If this is the case, then it is likely that the shells are from either salvo 16 or salvo 18, owing to their impact positions relative to the German ships. There is another theory that may be put forward on the image. The images show shell splashes indicating the impact of shells from the Prince of Wales that fell short of the German ships as she retreated. Having taken avoiding action around the sinking Hood, the Prince of Wales made good her escape by sailing south before altering course to the southeast. This put the Prince of Wales approximately 1.5 nautical miles to the south of the sinking Hood. Based on the image caption of the Prince of Wales being the smoke column on the left according to the caption, and discounting the mysterious dark shape, the position of the Prince of Wales relative to the smoke plume that denotes the Hood, it is possible that the image was taken between 06:08 and 06:09 am, shortly before the Bismarck ceased firing, when the Prince of Wales would have appeared to be astern of the Hood once more. It is known that when she retreated, Y-turret fired a number of rounds under local control directed at the Bismarck, which were not recorded on the salvo plot. The angle of the shell impact from the central smoke plume would appear to be more or less a direct line. Given that the Bismarck was ahead of the Prinz Eugen at the time, one can assume that if a direct line was drawn from the smoke through the shell splashes, then the line would end off the photograph in an area that corresponds with the known position of the Bismarck. The final photograph that shows the Bismarck on the starboard side of the Prinz Eugen is NH69727. This photograph shows the Bismarck completely silhouetted against the light sky on the horizon. A large cloud of smoke hangs directly over the stern of the ship as a result of the Bismarck's forward movement during the time period that has elapsed between this image and the previous one. When the images showing the Bismarck on the starboard side of the Prinz Eugen are reversed, the Bismarck is seen on the port side of the heavy cruiser, which ties in with the documentary evidence of the Bismarck's movements. There are no other photographs showing the Bismarck on the starboard side of the Prinz Eugen during the course of the battle, and there are no photographs showing the Bismarck exchanging positions with the Prinz Eugen. On average, Legemann was taking photographs at a rate of 1 per minute. Given this, the lack of photographic evidence makes such a move questionable. Legemann did not take any photographs of the Bismarck while the Prinz Eugen was making her series of turns between 06:03 and 06:08 am. While some may argue that it was at this moment, when Legemann was not taking photographs, that the Bismarck transitioned over to the starboard side, one must look at the viability. In order to make the turns to place her on the starboard side of the Prinz Eugen, the Bismarck would have had to have made sharper turns than those executed by the heavy cruiser. It is known that the Prinz Eugen fought the battle at 27 knots, and it is estimated that owing to the rate at which she overhauled the Prinz Eugen, the Bismarck was likely sailing at 30 knots. In order to have increased the distance that she did between photographs BA14619840553 and NH69728, the Bismarck would have had to have increased her speed to well in excess of 30 knots, and to attain a speed that most destroyers for the time would have found hard, if not impossible, to attain. Furthermore, if the Bismarck had also turned with the Prinz Eugen and transitioned over to the starboard side, the distance between the two ships would have been much closer. One must also ask, if the Bismarck turned to starboard to take up a position on the starboard side of the Prinz Eugen, why did the cruiser also turn to starboard and not make the execution of such a manoeuvre easier by reducing speed slightly and executing a turn to port? Further to this, neither the war diary of the Prinz Eugen nor the reconstructed war diary of the Bismarck record the ships exchanging positions during the battle. The war diary of the Bismarck does, however, record the change of position after the battle, in which the Prinz Eugen dropped astern of the battleship to disperse the oil slick. It would surely be the case that such a manoeuvre would be recorded in the war diary of at least one of the two ships, if not both, most certainly the reconstructed war diary of the Bismarck. Finally, Baron Burkhard von Mullenheim-Reichberg, the 4th gunnery officer of the Bismarck and most senior survivor from the sinking battleship, makes no reference to the Bismarck switching sides with the heavy cruiser. In all of the photographs that show the Bismarck on the port side of the Prinz Eugen, the sky is brightest just above the horizon, which indicates that the photographs were taken towards the rising sun. Given that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, owing to the sun just beginning to rise as the battle occurred, the sky to the west would still be predominantly dark. Coupled with this, the German squadron was sailing in a general southerly direction, with the result that their port sides would have been facing east and their disengaged starboard sides west. In order for the Bismarck to have been on the starboard side of the Prinz Eugen, the photographs would have been taken facing westwards, where the sky would have been at its darkest, not lightest. This serves to suggest that the photographs showing the Bismarck on the starboard side of the cruiser have been printed in reverse. One must also question what the Bismarck was engaging on the starboard side. It is known that the Hood and the Prince of Wales were always the port of the German squadron. Only HMS Suffolk was on the starboard side of the German battle group. It is known that the German battle group deemed that both the Norfolk and Suffolk did not pose a serious threat during the course of the battle, and it was believed that the British cruisers would leave the German battle group alone, allowing them to concentrate their fire on the Hood and Prince of Wales. While towards the end of the battle, as the Prince of Wales retreated, the Suffolk fired her forward turrets at Prinz Eugen in the mistaken belief that she was within gunnery range and that the forward armament of the Bismarck was traversed. There is no evidence to show that the Bismarck ever returned fire on the Suffolk. It is interesting to note in this regard image build 1461984-05514, which was taken at 06:19 am, just after the Battle of the Denmark Strait had ended. In the image, the Bismarck is on the port side of the Prinz Eugen, with her guns trained to starboard towards the Suffolk, ready to engage the British cruiser. It may be noted that the Bismarck did not open fire on the Suffolk. If the Bismarck moved to the starboard side of the Prinz Eugen and engaged the target off to starboard, which could only be the Suffolk, owing to the dispositions of the British ships, why, after the battle, would she return to the port side of the Prinz Eugen to retrain her guns on a target on the starboard side? Tactically, such a move would make no sense. Moreover, in the war diary of the Prinz Eugen, the ship's first gunnery officer, Paulus Jasper, reported that after the series of turns made from 06:03 am, the Bismarck came into his sights. This sighting indicated that the Bismarck would soon be directly between the Prinz Eugen and the Prince of Wales, leading to the order being issued for the Prinz Eugen not to fire over the Bismarck. Shortly after this order was issued, the order was given for the Prinz Eugen to cease fire, which indicates that the Bismarck was already on the port side and had been for some time before the order to cease fire was given at 06:09 am. In addition to this, the Prinz Eugen's secondary gunnery officer, Paul Schmalenbach, reported in the ship's war diary that during the battle he took an occasional look at the Bismarck. This would not have been possible if the Bismarck was on the starboard side of the Prinz Eugen, as the Bismarck would have been in a position away from the target area. It is understandable that one or two photographs may be printed in reverse, accounting for the fact that the Bismarck is seen on both the port and starboard side of the Bismarck, in contradiction to the documented evidence. Robert J. Winklerith has offered what may be deemed a rational explanation for this occurrence. On this, Winklerith has written, "The photographs were taken with a 35mm film camera, and after a 35mm film is developed, it is usually cut into strips of 4 to 6 frames for easier handling when using an enlarger. It is therefore possible that the strip containing the 6 photographs in question was inadvertently turned upside down in the enlarger, causing all 6 of the frames on that strip to be printed in reverse. In addition to the photographs, motion picture footage was taken aboard the Prinz Eugen during the course of Operation Rheinübung, of which approximately 2 minutes of footage covers the Battle of the Denmark Strait. By contrasting the footage against the previously mentioned photographs and the movements made during the battle, it is possible to establish that the bulk of the footage was taken between 06:08 am and 06:10 am. When looking at the footage of the Battle of the Denmark Strait, it is worth noting the editing of the footage. In the first instance, the Bismarck is shown ahead of the Prinz Eugen, while her plot map shows that the Bismarck only attained her position ahead of the heavy cruiser at around 06:05 am. In the footage, not only is the Bismarck seen ahead of the Prinz Eugen, but she is shown on the port side of the Prinz Eugen, travelling right to left across the screen, firing at a target on her starboard side. After having seen the Bismarck fire a salvo, the editors of the film included footage showing the explosion of the hood. Here, by looking at the direction of travel in the water, the direction of travel is seen from left to right, contradicting the image direction shown moments earlier. At the same time, owing to the direction of travel, the exploding hood is on the port side of the Prinz Eugen, yet the Bismarck is engaging a target, the Prince of Wales, on her starboard side. After capturing the exploding hood, the footage returns to the apparent starboard side, showing the Bismarck once more, before the switch is again made to the port side, showing the smoke from the retreating Prince of Wales on the right and the smoke from the hood on the left. The film footage was not taken between 06:03 am and 06:08 am, as this was when the Prinz Eugen was making her series of hard turns to starboard, which would have made relatively still picture taking impossible. Furthermore, the footage shows the Bismarck ahead of the Prinz Eugen, and no radical movements are made by either vessel in the footage, which when compared to the photographs discussed previously, leads to the conclusion that the footage was shot between 06:08 and 06:10 am, as the clarity of the film suggests that the Prinz Eugen was on a steady course. The first few frames of the footage are, however, slightly blurred, which would suggest that the cameraman began capturing the footage from 06:08 am and began rolling the camera just as the Prinz Eugen settled down from the last of her 3 hard turns, a mere 35 seconds before Lakeman took photograph NH69728. As a result of this evidence, it must be concluded that the battle film showing a port view of the Bismarck firing to starboard must in fact have been processed in reverse, as when properly orientated, the footage showing the Bismarck conformed to the documentary evidence relative to the battle and conformed to the footage of the exploding hood. In addition to this, the film footage reinforces the concept that the battle was fought on a straight line, the Bismarck having travelled down the port side of the Prinz Eugen, and supports the notion that no crossover of the 2 ships took place. This, in turn, serves to render most maps depicting the movements made during the course of the battle as incorrect. Based on this analysis, it is also possible to place all of the battle photographs in their correct order. Included in the following sequence of images, in order to illustrate every phase of the battle, are some images that have not previously been discussed. These images include NH69723, showing shells from the hood landing near the Prinz Eugen, and NH69724, which was also taken by Lakeman and shows the explosion of the hood.
Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more updates, like and share. You can also help to support the channel at Patreon. Details are in the description box below.